The 2024 NBA Finals are here, and after a week of no basketball, I was quite excited for this one. However, the game we got ended up being more of a bloodbath than an actual battle. Boston took a lead early in the first, and while they would let that lead slip from 29 at one point to just 8, ultimately, they would hold on, dominating Dallas on their home floor with insanely impressive defense and an absolute heater from Porzingis in his first game back since round 1. Hello everybody, welcome to Asa Rusty Buckets. If you are over on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I am trying to hit 200K on this channel by the end of the year, so that subscription is super appreciated. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio experience, and go ahead and check us out on Spotify, whatever platform you're on, give us a like, give us a follow. Also, I have a sore in my mouth and it is killing me, and it hurts to talk, but damn it, yapping is my job, so I'm gonna power through it. This quarter looked like an actually somewhat even affair after the first 3 minutes. However, that was primarily due to Boston just missing some threes that they would normally hit. But that did not last, as from the 9-minute mark onward, Boston would go on a comical 23-5 run. This was spearheaded by 3 major factors: their shooting coming alive, their defense being excellent, and really, the most important thing, Kristaps Porzingis was ridiculous. Al Horford ended up starting the game. I imagine that was just so if Porzingis had some early struggles, at least that wouldn't be how you establish the game. Starting the game early is important. But turns out, you didn't have to have any concerns at all because the dude was great. Scoring 11 points on 4 for 5 shooting in this quarter, a pair of middies over some smaller defenders, Hardy and Josh Green, a dunk as he drove by Lively, who was pressing him a little bit too hard for the jumper, and a deep 3 in transition in the final 2 minutes of the quarter. On top of that, he instantly had a major impact on the defense, getting 2 blocks, blocking Kyrie and blocking a poster attempt from Jaden Hardy on the fast break. Speaking of Hardy, he checked into the game and started off very aggressive, but unfortunately that did not really work out. He hit a free throw line pull-up that banked in, but that was the only shot that he hit. Otherwise, it was just some bad drives and bad 3-point attempts. Not to mention, being a smaller guard, he got abused a couple of times on defense. And honestly, the difficulty of that specific Hardy mid-range shot was indicative of the quality of looks that Dallas was managing to get. Luka looked really uncomfortable, at least by his standard. He seemingly lost the ball out of the pick and roll. I do think that Jalen might have stole it, but I can't tell 100% sure from the angle. Either way, it results in a transition dunk for Jalen. The only shots that Dallas would make were extremely difficult ones. Kyrie managed to hit a fadeaway mid-range shot over Derek White and Al Horford after losing the ball mid-air, and Luka hit an insane layup where he somehow found the rim floating it in around 3 Celtics contests. Sam Hauser was also weirdly loud in this quarter, stopping both Luka and Kyrie 2 times apiece, so 4 times in total, including stripping Luka Doncic and getting Kyrie to take a step back corner 3 that made him hit the corner of the backboard. Sam Hauser did this. And on the other end, he got a contested corner 3 of his own, but unlike Kyrie, he swished this one. This following that deep Porzingis 3 from earlier, so the Celtics ended up shooting 7 for 15 from outside in the first quarter. Yeah, things don't look very good for Dallas right now. The 20-37 score is the largest deficit following a first quarter in the history of the NBA Finals. A 17-point lead for Boston going into the second. In the second quarter, things did get better for Dallas, but not as much better as they needed them to be. The only shots that Dallas was hitting was, once again, ones that Boston still contested super well. They just hit them anyways. AKA, they were never getting any kind of clean looks. Meanwhile, on offense, the C's were either getting good looks at the rim, like this Tatum dunk off of a half spin on the Kyrie switch, or this open break dunk from Jaylen Brown where he definitely took it from Luka this time. And if it wasn't that, it was the Celtics bombing threes. At a certain point, it almost began to feel like bullying. This three from Porzingis in particular, yet another deep one at the top of the key had me thinking, stop, he's already dead. Speaking of Porzingis, he kept being amazing, hitting a pair of even more difficult mid-range shots. One to beat the shot clock on a step back over Josh Green, who might as well have been a chair for him, and another over Derrick Jones Jr., who, while not quite a chair, is still somehow too short to contest Porzingis. Meanwhile, their defense just was not letting Dallas get anything remotely easy. Porzingis did an amazing job guarding the Luka Lively pick and roll, breaking up 2 alley-oops consecutively, and Al Horford did an amazing job on switches in this quarter after doing the same in the first. And Luka and Kyrie just looked uncharacteristically uncomposed. Now, Luka actually heated up a little bit to close this quarter, which was actually a spark to, give you some hope going into the half. He was bad up until that point, and Kyrie especially was terrible. Luka missed some extremely makeable shots, including a wide open layup that I was baffled he managed to miss. And Kyrie threw an awful turnover into the backcourt that was not a forced error in the slightest. No pressure, he just throws the ball away. All that said, it's not quite over yet, and things are at least improving marginally for Dallas. They only lost this quarter by 4 points, which is still not good, but it's a hell of a lot better than losing by 17. Perhaps, given Luka is heating up, there is a chance that they can show some fight and at the very least make the score respectable and make it look like you feel good going into the following games. Or hell, maybe you can even make the comeback happen. In the third quarter, Dallas would indeed show some fight. Really, more specifically, Luka Doncic would show some fight. Going on a near single-handed run, hitting some deep threes, a typical step back, as well as a pull-up off of a screen from Kleba, with Brown contesting just a little bit too late. This three would cut Boston's lead to just 8 points. Now, this run was no thanks to Kyrie Irving, who would miss 2 wide open threes. He would miss a fairly open layup, get blocked by Jaylen Brown, embarrassingly might I add, and he would turn the ball over by dribbling off of his foot. What the fuck, man? Like, what the fuck? Things were finally going really well for Dallas, though, and it looked like they might actually mount that comeback I half-heartedly suggested was possible. But then 2 things happened that dramatically shifted the momentum back in favor of Boston. Both of these things involved Dereck Lively. First, after contesting a Porzingis 3, Lively started to run the break, but he did not quite realize that Tatum had grabbed the offensive rebound. He was already too far down the court, and Porzingis cut down the middle for a wide open dunk. He then fouled Jaylen Brown, and I don't know, I think it was a bad call in this instance. The free throw disparity, I'm pretty sure they got the same amount of attempts, or like it was 1 more for Boston. I didn't feel like the officiating in this game overall was bad, but of the bad calls I remembered, pretty much all of them were in favor of Boston. But this was Dereck Lively's 5th foul, and he was actually a big help in the run that they just had. So when he subbed out, things got a lot worse. Boston started hitting some threes, Al hit one out of the corner, JB hitting one off of a screen from deep to get a 2-for-1 opportunity. Brown in general was remarkable in this quarter on both ends of the floor, honestly even more so on defense. He had 2 huge blocks where he was left in the position of being an outright rim protector, not just getting a sneak block from the weak side, but rather getting challenged like a big man and sending the shot back like he's one of them. Doing this to Derrick Jones Jr. on a dunk attempt and Kyrie on a layup. Dallas was getting desperate, so desperate in fact that they checked in Tim Hardaway Jr. into the game, and they were down 20 going into the 4th quarter. And this time, there was not really any fight left in them. There were 3 plays that happened essentially sequentially, that sounds weird. 3 plays happened basically back to back that once they happened, I was like, okay, so it's done. There is no comeback happening here. First, Derrick Jones Jr. with 3 defenders back drove on the break, so he drove into 3 defenders. Then Drew Holiday posted up and bully balled PJ Washington, who is much larger than him, and then Kyrie fell down twice while Al Horford was guarding him. Luka and Kyrie checked out at the 5-minute mark, which means the rest of this is just garbage time. Boston would beat Dallas in a dominant display in Game 1, 107-89. All right, my key notes for the Dallas Mavericks. This is a hard game to evaluate for Luka. This was overall a very, very weird Luka Doncic performance because he did score the ball well. He finished the game with 30 points. His efficiency as a whole was all right. However, he didn't pass it well, or really wasn't even presented with the opportunity to pass it well. And I don't know how much of it was really his fault. It was more about Boston's defensive play style and their game plan. They really got into space and affected passing lanes, which just made it so that Luka had to score 1v1. So he finished with just 1 assist. And yeah, Luka is still a deadly one-on-one scorer, and he consistently burned these guys in those matchups. But if they're short jumpers or floaters or fadeaway jumpers or whatever, or deep step backs, all of those shots, even though Luka can make them at a way higher percentage than basically any player has any right to, it's still a lower percentage shot than a Derek Lively alley-oop or a wide open 3 for a guy who's shooting 37%. That is frankly a worse option defensively. If you're going to constantly collapse and give open looks, even if a contested shot from Luka is better than an open shot from a lot of other players, if every possession down the floor, your best case scenario is a contested shot, that's a win for the defense, and I think Boston got that win. I will elaborate more on that when I get to Boston. But speaking of assists, Dallas had practically none for this game as a whole. Kyrie Irving led the team in assists with 2. There's no one else on the team who had more than 1 assist. They finished as a whole with 9 of them on their 35 made field goals. That is 25% of their shots being assisted. Just so you know, on average, they had 22.4 assists per game, rather, in the playoffs, and they averaged 39 field goals, which is 57% of their shots being assisted. So less than half being assisted. It was all individual creation, and that's not just from Luka Doncic. That's just not just from Kyrie Irving. PJ Washington was getting in on that. Maxi Kleber's only bucket in this game was a drive that was definitely not an assist. Just everybody. Jaden Hardy, his buckets, especially his buckets late in garbage time, all of them just not at all teammate to teammate connections. Holy shit, Kyrie was bad. Let's just get that out of the way. He shot 6 for 19. Many of those misses were shots that he was very capable of making. It wasn't even just a matter of Boston playing good defense. Ironically, I feel like a lot of Kyrie's makes were when Boston did play really good defense, which, in part, that's kind of just because Boston played great defense the whole way through. But either way, there was some pull-up. There was a wide-open pull-up 3, a wide-open catch-and-shoot 3 off of an offensive rebound, a layup where he just had all the space in the world. There was a minor contest on it because it's the NBA Finals, for God's sakes. But, all of those shots, the dribbling off of his foot, falling down with Al Horford defending him and almost falling down a second time, that baffled me. And honestly, what baffled me in general was their inability to punish mismatches in any capacity. They let Horford or Hauser lock them up multiple times. I think there was even a possession where Peyton Pritchard survived defending Luka, and that should just never happen. And it's not that they didn't try to attack these mismatches, they just got no kind of separation. They didn't even look like mismatches, frankly. And can't say I expected that. While Boston is definitely known to have an ironclad defense, Horford being a little slow and 38 years old, and Sam Hauser not being known as a terrible defender, but not being known as a great one either, there was perceived to be at least some weak links within that, because there's almost always some degree of a weak link. But more or less, there was nothing for the Mavericks to exploit here. anything that conceivably would be exploited really wasn't. I mentioned the Kyrie drive. He had that bad drive into Jaylen Brown where he got blocked, and it was a sick block by Jaylen Brown, but it was also a stupid drive by Kyrie Irving. And in general, there were a lot of very dumb drives in this game. A bunch from Derrick Jones Jr., a couple from Kyrie Irving, and then a lot of them from Jaden Hardy. I think 2 or 3 of them in the first quarter. Let's talk about Hardy real quick. I actually like Hardy a lot, and I do think he had a lot of moments in the postseason, specifically some good shit in the Timberwolves series. I think he had a good game in the Timberwolves and OKC series that stick out. That's great. I don't know if he can survive this rotation. I don't know if he is really a rotation player in this series against this team, which kind of sucks because I don't know who else is. Don't get me wrong, he had good stats in garbage time, and if you look at his box score, you're going to say, hey, Hardy played pretty all right. I don't see what the problem here is. No, it was... I feel bad because I don't think it's Hardy's fault. It's okay not to be ready in this situation this early, but at the same time, don't put him in this situation, Jason Kidd. I feel like you should cut him from the rotation. Ideally, you also trim down Green's minutes a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if you try to find somebody on this bench. I don't think Tim Hardaway is the answer. I think they vaguely tested that. I also think they checked in Exum in garbage time specifically to see, hey, does this guy do okay in garbage time? Maybe we can soft launch him getting in the rotation potentially, but I don't know. Maybe you just tighten up the rotation and your starters are just playing a lot, you know, if you feel like you have the stamina to do that. But there were also times where they looked really gassed, really flustered. It's the same way that I felt after, not to the same extreme, but game 2 of Timberwolves Nuggets. I hadn't seen hesitance or discomfort with Luka Doncic, and in the case of that Nuggets Timberwolves series, Nikola Jokic to that degree before. I've never seen Jokic that bothered by a defense. I have never seen Luka and really the Dallas Mavericks, whose offense has looked unstoppable this entire postseason. I have not seen them look this uncomfortable the whole way through, and that's a little scary. They didn't get a single alley-oop this game. That's been a huge source of their offense. Honestly, I think you can chalk up basically all of Dallas's offense into like one of 3 categories. Catch and shoot 3, probably from Derrick Jones or Josh Green or PJ Washington, maybe Maxi Kleber. One of those, or a Luka Kyrie isolation, mid-range shot, step back 3, drive, whatever that may be, and then alley-oops. Those are kind of the 3 pillars of the offense. They're getting alley-oops and 3s generated off of Luka and Kyrie's shot creation. Unfortunately, they didn't really do well at generating either, but they especially didn't do well generating lobs. Like, at the very least, they got some open 3s and made some 3s. I don't think there was a single alley-oop this entire game that was converted on, and they only really tried it 2 times, and both times Porzingis broke it up. I did say going into this series that Porzingis would probably be the best at interrupting that kind of play, but I was honestly surprised to the degree in which he did it. I don't even think I can claim that I predicted this because he went much further than I thought would happen. I also feel like Dallas's bigs are in a weird position in this one. That's a big discussion that I had about, you know, going into this series, like, what do you do with your big men? Is this a mismatch with Porzingis? Are they going to struggle to go out there on him? I feel like Lively overcommitted on the jumper with Porzingis, and then Gafford did the exact opposite, which, you know, if I had to predict who would do either of those things, that would be what I would pick. But, you know, Lively, there was that one play where I feel like he just got way into Porzingis' face, and he allowed him to drive in for a dunk. Gafford, I know, was like all the way deep into the paint on 1 or 2 of those transition 3s, and it's like, dude, you just cannot go that far in when you know that guy's trailing behind you. So there's that, and then the fact that there is no alley-oops there was not much offense to go around. I think there were a couple. I would feel like Gafford scored almost entirely. At least 3 of his buckets were offensive rebound putbacks, or at least 2. Derek Lively, I don't even remember how he scored, but I think he had 2 points or 5 points. I think he only made 1 shot. So yeah, awkward shit for them. A huge pillar of their offense entirely gone. The other pillar of their offense, the 3, is not exactly going well because they didn't shoot well from 3 or that high volume. They didn't even get 30 attempts up, which is especially low considering who they're competing with. And then one half of the equation, the shot creation of Luka and Kyrie. Well, Kyrie was fucking terrible, and Luka's playmaking was not impacting the game in the way that it normally does. So instead of 3 pillars, you basically got 2 halves of 2 of them. And that's not exactly a recipe for success, especially against a team in Boston that had such a fantastic game plan that they executed on fantastically. So with that, let's get into my key notes for the Boston Celtics. I am baffled by the defense that I just watched. I feel like there were 3 mistakes the entire fucking game, and even the things that were mistakes were like things that you understand happening. Like, I think I mentioned Al Horford against Kyrie and Luka. There were 2 possessions, one against each of them, where Luka and Kyrie scored on Al Horford on the one-on-one matchup, and both of them, Al nearly got it. He was just a step too slow. It is what it is. There was one with Kyrie baseline, and the other one I think was just a straight line drive from Luka, and he just floated it with like just a little bit of space. Kyrie, just a little bit of space on his thing. So yeah, that's the only thing you can say was a defensive mistake this entire fucking game. And not to point out Al Horford's mistakes early on, because my God was his defense impressive in this game. This guy just turned 38. He is a 38-year-old center. Mind you, he's not just a 38-year-old center. He is, while you would expect one of these guys to be a battle-tested individual, Al Horford's played in a lot of fucking playoff games. He's played in a lot of regular season games. He was drafted, I'm pretty sure, in 2007 in that same draft class with Kevin Durant. He's been around the way. He has been here for quite a while, and he is defending Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving superbly. He couldn't have done a better job on switches in this one. I mentioned that Luka and Kyrie each scored on him once, but they tried to score on him multiple times. Whether it was Kyrie or Luka, he had no problem. He blocked a Luka step back 3. He blocked a Kyrie floater. He contested the hell out of multiple of their shots, or multiple times didn't even allow them, especially Luka, to get a shot off. So from that standpoint, if you're going to, the worst case scenario defensively is you allow that switch. The worst case scenario is you allow a Sam Hauser switch. And yet, under those worst case scenarios, frankly, these guys shot worse than they did against the all-defensive guys who were normally defending them. Sam Hauser, I mentioned, had those big moments on defense, hit some big corner, I think a pair of corner 3s as well, one in each of the first 2 quarters. I feel like he's a little bit underrated in this equation with Boston, where he's just like such a reliable 7th to 8th man. It depends really between who's better in the game, who plays more between him and Peyton Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard was bad in this one. He was 0 for 7 from the field and 0 for 5 from outside. So he ended up playing a little bit more minutes here. But like as an 8th man, give me Sam Hauser every day of the week. Dude's not a bad defender. He's got decent size. He doesn't make stupid decisions. I have only ever seen him be a pretty knockdown 3-point shooter. So pretty great 8th man. I feel like they also just didn't double team almost at all, which is very contrary to how we have seen teams defend Dallas. They have been throwing doubles at Luka willy-nilly. And don't get me wrong, there were doubles in this game. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I feel like if you ran the numbers, the percentage of time that they spent blitzing the pick and roll against Luka and especially double teaming him, I feel like those numbers are low. Double teaming Kyrie, those numbers are very low. There was just very little help defense until it was absolutely necessary. And there were a couple of possessions, especially with Luka, where you just found yourself on too much of an island, and the help kind of realized that they needed to help just a second too late. But other than those instances, I don't know that there's any criticism you can have for this defense in any capacity. And I think this is the right approach. This is something that's discussed historically when talking about how you defend superstar players in the playoffs. Like, do you double them and put as much pressure on them as possible, but then give opportunity for the Derrick Jones Jr.'s of the world to burn you? That is often something people discuss, but I very rarely actually see the concept of just, we're going to trust the one-on-one matchup and hope everything else works out. We're not going to shut down Luka, but we'll shut down everybody else. I feel like that generally does not happen in terms of defensive approach. And when it does, I also feel like it doesn't work that well that often. But Boston A is boldly attempting this, and I think it's worked, at least in this game. And B, I think they have the personnel to make it make sense a lot more than it does for just about any other team. Because, as I mentioned, the absorption of space, there was no easy passing lanes. Every pass that Luka made out of these doubles, there was just not an easy look to be found out of it. They were rotating in such a way that the only pass that could potentially lead to an open shot was almost always going to a guy who, A, you're pretty comfortable with him taking that shot, and then B, I did the A and B thing back to back, but it is what it is. But B, it's a cross the court pass, which we know Luka is capable of making, but it's not an easy thing to do possession after possession after possession. But I don't even know how they managed to pull this off, but they managed to be in the right place at the right time almost every time. The defense is remarkably impressive. If I can quickly talk about the offense, well, actually, let me add this. There were some blunders offensively for Boston in this one, specifically as it related to Jason Tatum. Nothing that significant, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But something that I want to point out, because I'm going to discuss, the future of this series, especially that 29-8 thing. Is that something to be concerned about? I think where Boston now is different from Boston in the past, on top of the Porzingis and Drew Holiday of it all, is that their defense is probably on a level now that they can get away with the sometimes sloppy offense more than they did in the past. Now, Boston has had impressive defensive units before, but I often felt like those were impressive defensive units, not in spite of defensive personnel, because they still had good defensive personnel, but they were a better defensive team on paper than I feel like they were in practice. And, against the truly excellent elite NBA offenses out there, I don't think that's the case anymore for this defense. I think this is a legitimately all-time great defense that can do such a great job and bother their opponents so much that you can afford Jason Tatum going 6 for 16. Sorry, not 6 for 16. Maybe it was 6 for 16, but there's a lot of sixes here. 16 points on 16 shots with 6 turnovers. That's not good. It is not good no matter how you spin it. It did not matter in this game. What I am more interested in is, will this matter going forward? Because his teammates were dominant the whole way through. I think Tatum scored his first points. I think it was a 3-pointer with a couple of minutes left in the first quarter, and by that point, it was already a double-digit lead. And I was like, whoa, Boston did all of that without Tatum scoring the ball a single time. Now, he had a lot of really nice drives. I think he started with 3 straight assists, setting up some good stuff. But in general, he was not much of a factor. He was playing very nonchalantly, didn't really seem like he was that concerned about establishing himself in this one. There were even a couple of shots that he took that I was like, man, you could have put more pressure on the defense. I know I always feel that way about Tatum, But in this one, there were a couple of them that I was like, I really especially feel like you normally even wouldn't have done that. It doesn't matter if your teammates dominate on offense, and then defensively as a whole, your team is ridiculous. If I can talk positively about the offense, though, Porzingis was on an absolute heater. On top of that, I think he takes them up another level defensively, and you could feel that when he was on the floor. As good as Al Horford was on all of those switches, it really felt like the rim just became entirely inaccessible as soon as Porzingis was on the floor. Just his shot making from mid-range, the deep three-pointers, it diversifies Boston's offense so much, and I knew that. And I used that as a talking point previewing the series, but I didn't know that it would be as impactful as this immediately. You know, because I mostly didn't expect Porzingis to be this good immediately, but yeah, what can I say? If he has a game like this regularly or anything close to it, Dallas has nary a fucking shot. Jaylen Brown, amazing on both ends, of course, especially defense, 6 stocks. 22 points, which isn't a lot, but it was a team high, and they were very timely points at that. A lot of big momentum shots from him. So just to last thing to say about Boston, they had this moment where they had the 29-point lead fall to an 8-point lead. And I was like, okay, you guys aren't doing this right. Like, I didn't hit the panic button immediately, but I was like, okay, as soon as this gets into single digits, I'm really starting to look at you a little bit closer. But almost immediately thereafter that, they took right back over it again. You know, they had that moment where they took their foot off of the gas, and that's scary, and it's not great. And if I can make the same point as I did about Jason Tatum's shooting, it's like, yeah, Tatum's poor shooting might not have made them lose this game, but in a game where Dallas is better because Dallas will be better than this, not necessarily every game, but in the future, I guarantee you there will be a game where Dallas plays better than this. In that game, if you're going to blow a large lead. In that game, if Tatum is going to shoot 6 for 16 with 6 turnovers. That's not great. At that point, you probably lose that game because of that. So it's something to look out for, but I'm not too concerned about it. Again, because of the defensive factor, and I feel like with the Porzingis and Holiday trade, you're just less fallible than you used to be. You are not as reliant on the RNG of the game. You're not as reliant on the hot three-point shooting. I mean, Boston had a good three-point shooting game, but it wasn't remarkable by their standards. This was a defensive win for them. The offense was good. There was a lot of moments where it felt like they could not miss, but the degree in which they made everything difficult for Dallas was incredibly impressive. Before I get out of here, let me just speculate on what this game means for what happens next. Specifically, is Dallas fucked? Do we have to feel like this series is just over now, which is the thing that people love to do after a game 1? Well, I'm going to say what a lot of people are saying, which is that Dallas lost 2 out of their 3 game 1s in the playoffs. To this point, game 1 against the Clippers and game 1 against the Thunder in round 1 and round 2. In those losses, they also lost by a very wide margin, where there was a 20-plus point lead at points in the game, and then they came back and won those series. So, not necessarily a big deal for that reason alone. However, I also feel like this was a more convincing game 1 win than those wins from the Clippers and the Thunder. Those games did not feel as much like a statement. You know, they didn't feel as much like defining game of the series so much as okay, Dallas has to figure some shit out. This one, especially just because of the defensive strategy, it depends how well that holds up. Is Jason Kidd going to find a way around it? Is Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving going to find a way around it? Do you go back to Maxi Kleber spacing the floor at the 5 and you get your bigs out there because the lob threat isn't working as well? That's something you could potentially explore, but I feel like if you're going to do the 5-out thing, you're almost certainly going to lose because Boston can do the 5-out thing way better than you can do the 5-out thing. I also think how the series goes forward does depend on if Tatum is better or not. I don't think that Boston could have him play bad for 6 more games and you still win. I don't think they're that level of stacked. I think this game probably inflates that idea, but I think they do need Tatum ultimately to not have bad offensive numbers, and he definitely did in this one. But I don't know. I very much doubt he'll be bad every game. I very much doubt he'll be bad most of the games. The series is a chess match. That's kind of what a lot of people anticipated. And I think it really entirely will depend on how Dallas responds to this defensive scheme in game 2. And then if they don't figure out in game 2, obviously we're going to need them to figure that out in game 3. Otherwise, this is going to be a very short finals, which would fucking suck. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the 2024 finals. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, especially because he is dealing with being a father, which is terrifying. And he stayed up later than normal to edit this. So everybody say, I love you, Nick, in the comment section. Give him hugs and kisses. Okay, goodbye.